Hey guys, on today's episode, we're actually going to talk about the gift of tongues and whether or not it's still acceptable in today's church. Hey guys, welcome back.
Hey guys, welcome
My name
back.
is Xavier.
My name is Adrian.
And this is 716.
Yes.
If you guys are new here, this is a Christian faith-based podcast.
Yes.
I know I have to focus on that every single time now.
Faith-based.
A faith-based podcast. And we like to get into controversial things. We like to get into relationship stuff.
Yeah, we also like to talk about our very own personal experiences. We like getting pretty transparent, pretty vulnerable in here. We all struggle with something. We've all gone through something. We all have a story to tell.
That's
so
right.
This is the whole point of our podcast. So we get really excited every time we get the chance to really sit here and yeah.
Yeah. And if you guys are listening to us on Spotify, welcome or welcome back.
Yes.
Unfortunately, you guys won't be able to see our special guest or hear our special guest.
Yes.
This is exclusive to YouTube only. But if you would like to see who it is,
you gotta come on over and check it out.
we have, as a special guest, we have our new puppy.
Our new puppy.
Babe, what's our new puppy's name?
Hi, Xena. Aw,
Xena.
I don't know if you can see her. Should I sit her up or no?
Yeah. Set her up for the
Yeah.
so that way everybody can see her.
All right.
She's a little sleepy right now.
Yeah. Look. Oh.
So
hi,
Xena is a
cutie.
red golden retriever, and she's actually Zuko's baby. Zuko is my golden retriever.
Yeah, so she is the daughter to our son. Hey, no
Oh yeah.
biting,
She's
no
a baby,
biting.
so she's
She's
teething. She's very bitey.
And you know what? I know this was part of like my last week's thankful thing, but this is this week's thankful thing too. You know why? Because I am now living it.
Yeah.
We actually and speaking of
And as she's like trying to bite on
she's
your
like
knee.
trying to bite on everything. She's
Oh, that was a nice
so
yawn.
adorable, man. I can't. But yeah, she is. Xena is my thankful thing of this week. Even though I'm not gonna lie, it's been a little bit rough because with puppies and stuff like that, like they are. They have a certain timeline, a schedule, and peeing times, and
especially when they're puppies, it's like every 3 or 4 hours.
I've had like every 3-4 hours alarm. Now, if I wake up to every single one, is a different story. No, I'm gonna no. There's been like an alarm where I'm like, oh my gosh, like I didn't hear it, and then I just go running outside and take her out. But yes, she is. I'm truly grateful for her because I feel like I haven't had a puppy of my own. Like I did, but I didn't. But now she like follows me and like loves me, and I love how calm she is. I feel like she makes me calm. At the same time, gets me anxious because I'm here like, did she poop? Did she pee? Oh my gosh, are you hungry? What are you? Talk to me.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. I grew up around puppies all the time. I grew up around dogs in general. And honestly, Xena. Oh, now you're.
And now
we can't see you on the camera.
She's completely gone.
And honestly, Xena is like having a puppy on training wheels because she is perfect. Like
she's so good.
She's so good about using the bathroom if we have her in the crate in the middle of the night. If she has to use the bathroom, she'll let us know while we're sleeping. Unfortunately, we have to wake up, but it is what it is, right? But she's good about letting us know. She doesn't do anything in the crate.
No.
And
she's
in the
been
house,
so good.
In the house, she plays with her toys. She plays with the dogs, but for the most part, she's pretty calm. And as you can see, she likes to take naps. She's like her mama in that sense.
I love naps. And
Aw.
she's like stretching.
She's just stretching.
Oh, my
Xena.
kitty.
Xena.
Uh-oh. She just opened her eyes.
She's probably going for another nap.
She's going like this, and you called her, and she opened her eyes back up like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Hey there. All right. I'm going to try my best to not get distracted because I'm really excited for today's video. But yes, that is my thankful thing too. I actually had something else that I was also thankful for, but I want to share that more for next week because it correlates like with my mug and all of that. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But yes.
Yeah, I mean, for me, so today I had a bit of a stressful morning. And
yes, you did.
Yeah, it was a bit of a stressful morning. And honestly, I didn't hear the 4 alarms that I have set up to wake me up. Xena decided to sleep, and she didn't wake us up at all. She normally wakes up around 6.
Yeah.
And today, of all days, she just decided, I'm going to go to sleep.
I'm going to sleep in
I'm just going to sleep in. I'm not going to bother them about going out.
Yeah.
And so I slept through all the alarms, and my supervisor calls me.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my God, I'm so
And all I hear
sorry.
is you saying like, no,
Yeah.
no. And I'm here like, what happened? What happened? And I'm like, oh my gosh, Xena, wait, what? What time is it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, I'm not so much thankful for that, because obviously I was late for work today, but I am thankful for his protection because I got to
Yeah.
where I needed to get to as fast as possible in a school
Yeah.
bus. So
Yeah. And the thing is that, like, when you kind of wake up suddenly, like, you can make a lot of, like, frazzled decisions.
yeah,
You know? Like,
especially if you're in an intense moment, you might make a wrong decision. You might be tempted to cut in and out of traffic.
right.
And with a
Exactly.
big bus like that, I mean, this is for 54
Yeah.
passengers. It's
Right.
not, yeah, it's not good. So, I'm thankful because God definitely protected me throughout that whole time. I
Mhm.
got to where I needed to get to. And although I was late, I was still within the threshold and I got the kids to school on time.
Yeah, and what a great way to start. Well, today is Friday for us, by the way. So what a great way to start a Friday.
Oh, what?
Thank God it's Friday.
Thank God it's Friday. I got to do that tomorrow.
Right, exactly, exactly.
Yeah. So for those of you who are new here, we do two segments. I mean, our first segment is our thankful thing.
Right.
Our second segment is our mug shots.
Yes.
So we love collecting mugs, and wow, I almost called you Adrian, babe.
I mean, that is my name. But yeah, we actually, it's crazy. We really don't call each other like,
No,
our
I don't.
names.
I hardly.
I'm
it's
never like,
very
hello,
weird.
Xavier. Ugh,
Yeah,
that
it's
sounds
very
weird.
weird to call you Adrian. I just
We babe each other all the time.
yeah, it's babe. Yeah.
It's babe, that's it. But yes, so my cup, it says it's a nice bright yellow and it says so very blessed.
Yeah.
And yes, there's a million reasons why I can say that. But one of them is literally right here next to me. Oh my gosh.
You just pulled their leg
Just
up.
pulled her one leg. Oh my gosh. Oh my god.
So for my mugshot, I have a rather brand new cup. Just came in the mail today. Excuse me. This is why we have water in this cup. So this cup actually came in the mail today, and just in time for the podcast.
Right.
And it says, "Give me." Oh, it doesn't say it on both sides. It says, "Give me Jesus."
Yeah.
And honestly, I love the shape of the mug. It's like a cream color.
That's
I mean,
been like
it's
the
perfect.
new in general. It's just a very muted beigey tone.
Yeah, is that
It's
what
like,
it is?
Yeah, I like it. But I wonder if like years from now we're gonna look back and we're gonna be like, ew, like why were you guys so plain and like dead and stuff
I mean,
like
I
that?
love.
I
Is
do like
gray
it.
considered muted?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah?
It's like
I love the
it's-
color gray.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the white, the grays, but right now we're transitioning from like the gray era to like the more beigeier era.
Yeah, I have
So-
noticed that. It's
But I
like the
like
nude
it.
tones and the
Yes.
grays and the like the brown carpets and stuff like
Like
that.
everything's a little more tan
Yeah,
tone.
yeah,
And
yeah.
it looks like that sepia filter from back in the day.
Sepia. Is that the brownish on the
Yeah.
outside? Oh,
You know
okay,
how it was
okay.
like black and white and then there was sepia like
Yeah. Yeah, that's I mean, that's interesting. I have noticed that. I mean, even a couple of people that we have visited, their living rooms are exactly like that. So yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So not prolonging into that anymore.
Right.
You guys obviously clicked on this and you saw that we were talking about tongues.
Yeah.
Tongues happens to be one of those controversial topics that come up in church, and people are undecided of whether or not we should be doing this.
Right.
For the most part, it's because you can't really, I want to say just interpret it. So you can't really get the validity of someone's.
Well, not everyone can interpret it.
Right. Not
Right.
everyone can interpret it. So you never really know if someone is speaking in tongues because they're actually being led by the Holy Spirit. It's
Right.
actually, the angelic tongue as it's described.
Right.
Or if it's just somebody saying humana humana,
Right.
not for nothing.
Right.
So we wanted to get into that, and just to start it off with our first verse, it's 1 Corinthians 14, verse 1 and 2.
And I just wanted to say, like, I'm really excited to actually be recording this because, we have like a list of like different topics that we really want to talk about. And this has been one that has been there for
Yeah,
quite some
yeah.
time, and I'm just like, you know what? I think it's about time we really.
I thought it was
to
a
continue.
good way of getting into it after the last episode
The
that we
last
just did.
episode, yeah.
You know, the
Let's
episode
talk
of
about the differences.
speaking into the atmosphere. So
Which,
to
by the
speak.
way, if you guys haven't watched that, that is our last episode. It is, should Christians practice the law of attraction? And we kind of went in deep with that one
Yeah.
too. So
Yeah,
go
that
ahead
was a
and
good
check
one.
it out. Yeah,
That was definitely a good one.
yeah.
But yeah, going back, so in 1 Corinthians chapter 14, verse 1 and 2, it says, "Follow the way of love and eagerly desire gifts of the Spirit, especially prophecy. For anyone who speaks in a tongue does not speak to people, but to God. Indeed, no one understands them. They utter mysterious by the Spirit. They utter mysteries by the Spirit." Oh, wow. I read it like it was going to continue. They utter mysteries by the Spirit.
Yeah.
And yeah, like tongues is something, even growing up, tongues was always something that I found interesting.
Yes,
Um,
I would say the same thing.
As a kid,
too.
I'm not even going to lie. As a kid, I described it crazy language.
I remember when I was younger, if someone in my church was like talking in tongues or they were being like, like the Holy Spirit came down and all of that. I remember like sometimes like I would like stare at someone because it's like, what is going on?
Right.
And I remember my mom would be like, hey, you just don't stare. You just have to pray. And I was
Okay.
like, okay, but then I'd be with my eyes closed and be like,
Man, my story went a little different.
Right.
As a kid, I called it, in my head, I called it the crazy language.
really?
Yeah, because it's like I never really had a good understanding or a good grasp of what speaking in tongues was. I just knew people were making noise.
Right. As a kid, that's how
like
you
as a
see
kid,
it.
that's how I saw it. And I never really had somebody explain to me like, hey, they're actually talking with God, or no one
Right.
ever really dove into that with me.
Right.
And I mean, I was also
Well, I think-
like 10 or 11 at
I
the
was gonna-
time.
But I mean, 10 is actually like a pretty good age.
No,
Like, I
no.
remember,
I'm sorry. It wasn't 10 or 11. I was probably like,
I was
now
like,
I'm thinking I was like 7 or 8.
I was like
because this
5 or
was before
6.
I got baptized, and I got baptized at 10.
Oh, yeah. No, I remember being like 5 or 6, maybe even a little bit earlier than that. I don't know why. I have a pretty good, what it's where they talk about like your earliest memory that you have.
Yeah.
I have a pretty good early memory childhood because this was in the time where my dad was still alive. So
Okay.
I remember like them telling me like, hey, you just don't like, just be respectful and this and that. I'm like, okay, I don't know what that means, but all right.
Right.
But again, like who's going to be explaining to a 4, 5, 6,
yeah,
even
I mean,
8-year-old child,
you don't think they
like-
need to know about that.
right. But it actually goes to show that like kids are observing everything.
Yeah,
And
I
if-
sure was.
And if anything, it kind of like opens my eyes to like when we have kids, you
Yeah.
know, like they are watching everything,
Yeah.
and I think it's important to just not look at kids as like, oh, it's okay, like just
Yeah.
no, they're observing,
Yeah,
and this
sure.
is memories that they're gonna carry on.
Yeah, and when I discovered, like when I was told that it was something spiritual, it was after getting smacked in the lip.
Oh.
Yeah, because the thing is, I said it out loud one time. Yeah.
Wait, what? What
yeah,
did you say?
yeah. So my first experience of learning what tongues was and realizing, oh, I have to respect this. It was at a baptism, and someone was being baptized. She was new to the church and everything, and when she got baptized, she came out speaking in tongues. Like she came up from the waters speaking in tongues. And we were in Delaware in a river.
Okay.
Yeah. And
Man, that's so cool that you guys had baptisms like that. I mean, I'm going to share mine in a little bit too, but like my baptism, because we came from a denominational church and stuff.
Right.
There was like a set location, church specifically, where they had the tubs and stuff like that. But yeah, I'm sorry. Continue.
Yeah, but no. And what I was gonna say was when she came out speaking in tongues, I'm like, it's not a big deal. Like they just dipped you in the water. Why are you coming out making all this noise?
Oh my
This is
God.
me. I'm actually speaking verbally now. And I'm saying it, and I think I was saying it with one of the other kids that were there,
They
And
probably
my
said it.
mom looked back at me. She gave me that
Oh, I could
like
see
mama hablar en casa type of stare.
The Nilsa eyes. I know what that is.
Yeah, she was like, we're gonna talk at home with her eyes, basically. Oh,
Oh,
she's
my
just
cutie,
stretching.
look at the little legs.
And so I it kind of went by, right? But then when we were leaving, and we were on our way home, I said it again. I was like, why? But this time I was kind of like asking.
Right.
I'm like, why did she start making like all these crazy noises? Boom.
Damn, you got that Puerto Rican
Yeah,
bofeta.
yeah. She was like, "What did you say?" And this and that, and like at first, it was kind of like a shock. Like, what? Like, I don't even understand.
What did
this.
I do?
Like I don't get this. Like, I honestly got upset. And then my dad was like, "That is a moment that you need to respect. That is a moment between her and God.
Yeah.
You can't speak like that about that." But I never had a good grasp or a good understanding of what it was.
You see, I never had the guts to like really ask what that is. Like, I don't know. I just remember being a child and being very like quiet and reserved. Like I would just look but I just remember my mom saying like, "Hey, when that's going on, you just don't look and we have to pray." That's it. And for me, it was like my whole life, like, okay, like if someone was like going in or anything, I'm like, okay, don't look.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So it was.
I mean, growing up, I would always question in my head.
Well, you know what's crazy too? I think a lot of it has to do because we grew up in a Spanish church. Like we grew up in different churches, but a lot of the Spanish churches, especially like in the Elizabeth area, definitely have more of that Pentecostal, background or denomination, or has been inspired by it, or whatever the case is. So, speaking in tongues is like a very it's a very normal or very like preached out thing there versus like other churches. Maybe if they were, I don't even know, other different cultures, or I don't know exactly how it is because I didn't grow up.
Right.
But with us, it's like we've seen it.
It was pretty normal.
It was pretty normal, yeah. But for someone else, like they probably didn't really get to experience or see that as much as maybe we were. Like I think we were exposed a lot more to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I remember for me, growing up, so it went from that stage of like, okay, I need to respect this. This is obviously like God's doing something. That's all I knew. And then as I started getting older, I wanted to, obviously build my relationship with God. I remember even being at a young age, like saying like, I want to like be strong in the Lord and I wanted this. And then, I didn't understand what it was exactly to speak in tongues. Like in my head was like, okay, so how do you do it? Do you just like, am I supposed to repeat someone?
Right.
Am I supposed to like what happens? Like, and I'm just like, I don't really know. Like the concept again wasn't explained to me.
Yeah.
And it was also very like, so how do you get it? You know? And in my head, it was always like, if you can speak in tongues, it's because you're pretty up there with God. Right.
And I remember hearing something like that too. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was always very like, oh, that person is speaking in tongues. Like they like this with God, And so in my head, like I always desired that. I've always wanted to be able to. She's just stretching.
Try not to get distracted
so
with
cute.
that. I know, it's just adorable.
But yeah, so I've always wanted to speak in tongues, and I remember like truly praying and desiring that, But again, I didn't really know, and I feel like there was just so many moments where I was also misled. I remember going to one of those big youth fests, and I remember there was a guy that was praying. And this was like thousands of people in like this convention, and everyone went up to the altar call basically. And then the guys are like, if you want to speak in tongues, you just have to like believe that you will and you can. And on the count of 3, everyone is going to speak tongues in this place.
Oh,
and
wow.
I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, like, is this the moment like that I finally get to?
This was at a youth fest?
And this was at a youth festival.
Is this the Spring
one
Fest?
of the Spring Fests.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, like this is amazing. And he's like, all right, get ready. Like at a count of 3.
So like 3, 2, 1.
Yeah. And everyone just starts like yelling, but I'm here like, I'm like, this doesn't feel right. Like, it didn't feel natural.
Did you yell?
I tried to, like, maybe I'm saying something, but no, I was just like, no, this isn't it. Like, this.
You know, that's amazing that you were that young and you had the discernment to say no. Like this isn't how it is.
Because, like, I know what it sounds like, and this is the part where it's like.
So you tried to.
I tried to, but in my head, I stopped. I'm like, I feel like I'm stupid. Like,
that's crazy.
Yeah,
that's
I'm like,
interesting.
I feel like this isn't it. Like, this can't be it. Right. Because when people go in my head, I'm like, they're in tears. Some of them start like
some
kicking stuff, like, you know,
I've
going in, you know,
that.
like it for everyone is different, you know. So I'm here like, this isn't it. And I'm just all like, and if it is, like, I am seriously underwhelmed of like what this was, you know. But I was convinced in that moment of like, no, like I haven't spoken it yet.
How old were you? Do you remember?
I was maybe like 12 years old.
12 years old. Dang.
Like 11, 12. Yeah, I remember like
You see how crazy, how easily someone can be misled by just someone that, I mean, I'm not going to say this person, you know, was doing this on purpose and it was a joke to him or anything like this. You know, I'm sure this person generally wanted everyone to experience what it was to speak in tongues, but that's just not the way to go about it, because everybody has their moment. You know, everybody has their encounter, and
it's different
and we'll
for
go
everyone.
into,
it's not,
you know, we're going to go into these moments and how these moments work, but definitely that's not how it is.
Like, I knew right away. I'm like, okay, this isn't it. But I would also, you know, hear it from even like family members, you know, because a lot of my family members came to Christ once they were like teenagers, and, you know, who knows who taught them and what got passed down along, you know, and stuff like that. So a lot of times it was like, oh, you need to learn how to, like, you need to pray so you can speak in tongues and stuff like that. And I'm here like,
I've got
I'm
that.
trying my hardest and I can't do it, you know? And I do remember one time that, like, I went to, it was like an altar call that I went to. This was another one. This was, I think I was already 14. Yes, this was actually when we just went out, me and you.
Okay.
And I remember this lady comes and prophesies and all of that. And then she comes up to me and then she's all like, you've been wanting to speak in tongues and God's going to give that to you. You're close, but you're not there yet. And I'm here like, okay, but
that's interesting.
But she's all like, but I know that's what you desire, you know, and like God's gonna give you that,
right?
And I just remember thinking like, okay, when is that moment happening, you know? And I don't know if you were gonna say something.
No. If anything, I'm more interested in how that, like, okay, so everybody has their own experience, right? I'll ask this and to people who actually speak tongues, which, by the way, I don't speak tongues.
Yeah.
You know, obviously you did, but I would love for you to describe what you were doing right before and how it was.
Right. Yeah, because I had all
how
the
it
questions.
was afterwards. Like what was in your head after it happened.
All right. So, okay. Cause I still remember like everything, just because this was like, for me, it felt like I wanted to graduate and get, like, it's so sad, right? It sounds like it's such, like, ignorance, but in my head, I'm here, like, I just want to finally get to that level.
Right, because, well, I mean, not for nothing, but this is what you've been taught. It's
right.
Like, speaking in tongues is on a level.
Yes,
you know, like, that's what you're taught.
Right. I mean, and also I think just being able to be like baptized in the Holy Spirit, just in general. Like, I'm here like, God, I finally want that encounter, you know, because you go from a young age of like just going to church constantly and then you're just doing what everyone else does because that's what you're told to do. But, you know, I think at this age I started kind of getting the understanding of like, oh, I know who God is, like, but I want more. Like, I just don't know what that means, you know?
Right.
So I remember when I can't remember if I was 15 or 16. I think I was about to turn 16. But so basically in our church, there's all these different like, what is it called? Like sections in
well,
like,
it was Assemblies of God.
You're right. It was Assemblies of God. And so there's different like locations of Assemblies of God. And think of it like counties, right? So there's a bunch of cities that fall under one county. So there was a bunch of there was a bunch of churches that fell under this one specific
One
area.
name.
Yeah, and so then there was a specific designated baptism day.
Okay.
So everyone who was going to get baptized would come to this one specific church, and then, you know, whoever was ready and did what they had to do and all of that would go get baptized. So I remember I took like a couple of like baptism classes. They really wanted to make sure, you know what you're doing and all of that. And I just, for me, it was more of like, okay, like, this is great. Like, this is my next step into my relationship with God.
Yeah.
And so I remember we went to like this church, and so what I was saying was really cool with you guys is that you guys got baptized like in the river, which I think would have been so awesome. But
I think symbolically it's beautiful.
well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Symbolically, I think like that's so awesome, you know, like the way everyone else did it back then, you know, and we're here.
Yeah, essentially that's what that's supposed to represent.
And then for us was more of like we went to a church, and then where the altar is would, like, I don't know, let's say there was a cross right at the altar, it would just like open up in dividers, and then there's a tub there, and the
like
tub,
a pool tub or like
a pool tub, like, yeah, like a pool. Think of it just like a big rectangle, and then there is a glass, and the people, like the congregation, could see between the glass, so they could see the glass, they see the level of the water, and then they would see you actually get baptized.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so technical difficulties. We just realized that this camera wasn't recording, or it stopped recording after 11 minutes.
Yeah.
So we're jumping back into it, but go ahead, babe.
Yeah. So also, don't mind. She went out for a
potty
walk, break. You know, she drank some water, and now she's like full energy. Oh. But yeah. So basically, we were talking.
Touch your mic a little bit. There you go.
Okay. So basically, we were talking about my baptism and like how it happened. So once it was like my turn to go up for the baptism, there was like a huge line that was forming. You know, now I think about it, because we were all in white robes. I'm like, this has to be like when we're waiting at the gate entrance.
Yeah.
But yeah, we had like those.
Funny.
We had like those choir white robes, and then we were all just waiting on a big line.
Yeah.
And I remember the worship team going up, and then they're like singing their songs, and you know, it's like full on worship mode. But it was actually like it wasn't like slow songs. It was like corito type things.
Like hymns?
Like, yeah, like fast paced like hymns, right?
Okay.
So, in my head, I'm just all like, all right, people are getting baptized. Like, I'm seeing like way ahead. There had to be at least like 50 people getting baptized that day.
Right.
And I remember thinking like, all right, well, my turn's going to come soon and all of that. So then I'm looking up ahead, and I'm like, oh, well, this is exciting. But I wasn't necessarily feeling emotional. It was more like a, yay, it's finally my turn, you know, because I remember seeing my brother getting baptized. I remember seeing like older friends and family members getting baptized.
Yeah.
Girl, that is hurting my finger. She thinks I'm a chew toy. Like,
yeah.
But yeah. So then as I'm getting closer, I remember like, there was about like 3 steps to go up, and then you would go straight ahead, and then there was a guy that, you know, he would be there I'm sorry, she's just looking at me, but you know, he would be there, the one that would baptize you. So then as we're getting closer, I remember like I'm just all like, all right, like cool, like my turn's about to be up.
Yeah.
And then I guess there was people that were directing like all of us, like, hey, like, okay, keep walking up ahead and whatever. And then I remember one of the ladies, and actually the person that was in front of me was someone that I went to church with, and me and her weren't close, but just to put it in context, like, I was a very shy person. Like, I wasn't one to raise my hands, because
like when in prayer,
like, yeah, in prayer and worship, I wasn't the one to like raise my hands, because I would be like embarrassed.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be that person to say like amen or like hallelujah. Like I was
a little shout
super,
of praise.
yeah. I'm here like no, but I was very like just I was
shy.
a very shy person.
Yeah.
I was super reserved in that sense. And I remember the girls in front of me, and like I was just like, hey, like, we're going up next, but everyone's just kind of quiet, like listening to like the hymns going on. It was like coritos type.
Yeah. Like the old school songs.
Like the old school corito pentecostales like
Mhm.
type and whatever, but they're going in
Right.
like I just remember the drums going all in and all of this, and I was all like, damn, they're doing good. And then I remember, again, as we're getting closer, there's a lady telling us like, okay, you can keep going ahead. And I'm just like looking, and she tells me, she's all like, hey, everyone here, like, we need to start praying. Like, just start praying.
Okay.
And I'm here like,
Is this right before you were?
I had maybe like 4 people in front
Okay.
of me,
Yeah.
but it was pretty quickly, like the baptisms that were going on. So about 4 people in front of me, and I hadn't stepped the steps yet. So basically there would be the person getting baptized, then the next person, then there's the one step, and then there's another one. So yeah, I was like the 4th person. And then I remember, I'm like, okay, I'm going to start praying. But it was always like yo, why aren't you praying? And I'm like, okay.
Okay.
And then so I remember I started praying and stuff. And then I remember in that moment, like, just closing my eyes. And then out of nowhere, like, it's like this sudden, the Holy Spirit just basically came down, like, in that moment and manifested himself. And in that moment, I just started bawling out of nowhere. And I'm just all like, what the heck? And then they were just like, keep praying, just keep praying and stuff. And then I start speaking in tongues.
Wow.
Just like that.
Just like that you had. Okay. I'm not a person who speaks in tongues.
Right.
So to your best ability, what was it like?
So
So people have described it as I just gave in to the Spirit and my
Basically.
tongue started moving, or I started, saying what I was saying.
So think about it in the sense, so like everyone's different and it is a little weird to describe, but I think it would have also been useful to know like how it happens, because again, growing up, nobody really tells you like,
Yeah,
how you
no
speak in
one
tongues.
really gets
So
into
it's
that.
all like, so how do you know when you are or
Right.
if you're not? So I remember for me, I'm like praying, and I'm just thanking God. I'm like, God, we worship you. And in that moment, just like out of nowhere, like full, like I'm like, I don't know, like the feeling of like someone breaking up with you type crying, like it was like full on, like
Wow.
it was like instantly.
Yeah.
And it was
very emotional.
so heavy, so heavy. Like his presence was like thick and tangible in that moment. And then, so think about like when you're like, like going like this in the middle. So in the midst of doing that, my tongue is just going on its own. Like I have no control. I don't even fully remember like everything going on in that moment or how long it was for.
You were just kind of zoned into whatever it was.
My eyes were closed and I was just speaking in tongues.
Yeah.
And then I remember they were like, okay, like just keep going up. But the next thing I know, like as I'm speaking in tongues, eyes closed, praying, like my hands are up at this point.
Yeah.
Like, from someone who's just so shy and like doesn't do anything to like this, it was definitely like, wow, like a full encounter. And then I just remember in the middle of me like speaking in tongues, the guy's like, and we're going to baptize you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And in the middle of me still speaking tongues, he just goes like, whoosh, and I'm like,
He
but
just starts dunk you.
yeah, yeah. And then I remember I continue still like speaking in tongues, but then like I just, I got up and then I was just like my like I just kind of came back and
Like you woke up from.
right.
Well,
yeah.
I don't want to describe it as you woke
don't
up
say
from
it.
that.
Yeah, but it was more like I stopped praising in a sense,
Right. You
and I was like,
stopped.
wow, like that, like I just remember because afterwards we had to change and there was a whole changing room, and I was like, did that just really happen?
Yeah.
And it was just a beautiful moment.
Wow.
That's
It's crazy because honestly, growing up, I've always questioned of what it is to speak in tongues, and I've always questioned, like, it wasn't more of I want to be able to speak in tongues. It was more of how do I know that this person's actually speaking in tongues?
right.
Even as a young person,
Yeah.
I've always questioned it, and I don't know if that was a faith thing or it's just the part of me wanted to believe what was going on, and part of me does. Like I do believe in what it is to be gifted with that, to be gifted with speaking in tongues. I do believe in all that, and I do believe that, you know, it comes from you know, zoning into praise and worship and actually praising God the way we should, and you know, but that's your worship to God. That's she is all over the place.
I think we're gonna have to put her away in a bit.
Yeah. Let's cut it here and
sorry guys.
Give us
Brief
1 second. Give us
momentary-
1
as you can
second.
see, I don't know if you can see, but she's all over the
She
place.
she woke up with a whole new level of
Listen,
energy.
Mommy is trying to talk here about the Holy Spirit. All right, girl.
Go ahead, baby. All right, so now that we got that settled,
All right.
but yeah, you know, like I remember always just questioning it as younger. I kind of forgot where I was going with it, but for the most part, you know, when you started speaking tongues, I mean, we were dating at the time. That's when I kind of woke up to the realization, like, there's no way that you're faking it.
Right.
There's no way that you're faking it. And it was when you started speaking in tongues where I started like, okay, I need to get a better understanding of what this is.
Right. Yeah.
You know, because this isn't just, you know, like, I know she's not faking it.
All right.
You know, and this is me growing up as a spiritual baby and stuff like that. And it sucks because, you know, I've always struggled in that area.
Right.
But yeah, you know, like.
But that's the thing where it's like you didn't struggle in that area. It's just.
No, it was struggling in that area in the sense of like. I
think it was like your
like,
lack
was
of
it real?
knowledge.
Was it real? Are people faking it? Are people just being emotional?
Right.
You know, like I always questioned all that.
Right. I did too.
No one really like there was nobody on YouTube questioning theology or anything like that at the time. It was just me and myself and the way, you know, like I just spoke with God.
Right. And it was all like, let me not even dare ask this anyone in church because then they're like, how could you think like that? Or
right.
whatever.
And you know, and growing up, it kind of also upset me because there were people that made themselves feel or made themselves seem like, oh, well, I'm this big, you know, worshiper and I'm on a whole nother level and you need to respect me because I speak in tongues.
Yeah.
You know, they considered themselves like these giants in the name in the eyes of God.
Right.
You know, and that's why some people actually believe that speaking in tongues isn't for today's time. Right. They say that it's because they say that people who do it to only edify themselves, but to boast themselves.
Yeah.
To make them to puff out their own chest, to make themselves feel better about themselves in the Spirit of God.
Yeah, and it's like obviously like we're not the ones to 100% know.
Yeah.
Right? You know, God can give us a discernment to know when someone is faking because it definitely has happened before. But I also don't think it's always necessarily our job to try to figure that out.
And I realized that job when, you know, like when I was older, you know, because it's like, okay, so if they're faking it, it doesn't really matter because at the end of the day, that's between them and God.
Right.
You know, like in the Bible, it shows that it doesn't actually edify the church.
Exactly.
In any way. Yeah. So if that person is faking it,
right.
A big whoop. It's not my job to discover that.
Right. Yeah. And I think, I don't know. I think it's definitely because, okay, even when I learned or when I started speaking in tongues, you know, it did happen after that, obviously, like, I wouldn't say frequently, but it did happen. And I still didn't even fully understand what that meant to me.
Right.
Like, I'm like, does this mean that me and God just had a really good connection?
Yeah.
Or did this mean that, like, you know, I don't know, is this just a once in a while? Like, what's the deal here?
Yeah. And what sucked is that as I was growing up and John, like, now I'm questioning it, like, okay, she's speaking in tongues. This has to be something different. Like there's got to be, like, what is this?
Yeah, I do remember that where it was a lot like, well, it hasn't happened to me. So, like, does that mean, like, I mean, I don't know if you, like, would question your relationship or salvation
all the time.
Whatever.
And it didn't help that I had, I'm not going to specifically say who, but there was people in my old church or a person, whatever, right?
Right.
That specifically said, well, if you can't speak in tongues, then that means you haven't entered into real faith. And if you haven't entered into real faith, you can't be saved and you don't go to heaven.
Wow.
You get me? So here I am, a 15, 16-year-old. I forget how old we were.
Right.
And now I'm questioning, am I even going to go to heaven now?
All right. Because
And
I
I
can't.
can't speak in tongues.
Right. Wow.
You get me? Like they made me feel so bad about myself.
Yeah, that's actually really sad.
Yeah,
because
it's
here
terrible.
you are, like, I mean, first of all, it's already hard to be in church at that age, right? It's like you against the world,
Yeah.
right? And it's already like not a, cool thing at that age to be seeking God. And then here you are, it's like, well, I'm going to seek God anyways, but now it's all like, wait, but am I doing it correctly? Which is,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah, for sure. And there's a verse though that gave me comfort. And this is also for anybody that's questioning whether or not you have to speak in tongues.
Right.
Paul he's the leader in Corinthians. He led the whole Corinthians book, the book of Corinthians, right?
Yeah.
And in 1 Corinthians 14 verse 5, he says, I would like every one of you to speak in tongues.
Right.
Now, again, he said, I would like every one of you to speak in tongues,
Right.
which means not all of you speak in tongues, but I would like every one of you to speak in tongues.
Right.
But I would rather you have, I would rather have you prophesy.
Right.
The one who prophesies is greater than the one who speaks in tongues unless someone interprets, so that the church may be edified.
Right.
Going back to what we said, speaking in tongues does nothing for the church.
Right. Yeah.
And it says it here in Corinthians.
Yeah. Again,
Unless
there's an interpreter.
Unless there's an interpreter.
To be honest, like in my lifetime, I may have just seen maybe like one interpreter.
I did. We had one in our old church.
Like we had one that would come every now and then, or I can't remember because I was also really young, but I do remember there was moments like in our church where it's like worship mode, and then when this person would start talking, like everyone would kind of just like know like, oh, they're interpreting, and a lot of times the interpretations, sometimes they were like, we worship you, God, and all of this, but then there were other times where like that person is just speaking out like, and God says that there's this in this church.
Wow.
And that there's this going on and this needs to clear out, or he's going to make it reveal itself.
That is edifying the church.
And
that
people were
crazy.
just all like, ooh, and in this moment, it was like total quiet, like everyone's just listening.
Yeah.
And this person didn't have a mic or anything. They were just like, and that was their gift, the gift of interpretation.
Yeah. There was the lady that interpreted in our church. She didn't interpret for others, but she interpreted for herself. So she would speak in tongues. She'd be praising, worshiping. And then out of nowhere, she'll start speaking in her own tongue, or our language. And she would interpret exactly what she said or was saying.
Yeah.
And it would usually, just like you said, it would usually be for the church, kind of like a motivational thing or a strengthening thing. But there were many times where it was for the church,
right?
Where it was, this is what's happening, or the pastor's not doing this, and it was specific.
Yeah, wow.
And it's amazing. But again, tongues only edifies the church if there's an interpreter.
Right. Yeah. That's insane.
Yeah.
and that's the thing. I think that, while yes, as when I got to that point, quote unquote, it was like, wow, like this is the moment I've always prayed for. I mean, but then, you start to grow more in your faith, and you start to read your Bible, and you start to really read things out, and you're just all like, oh, this is actually like, I built it up so much in my head. But it was also because the culture around me made it very much like that.
I mean, growing up in a very charismatic, Pentecostal, evangelistic type of church, it was like that. The culture was surrounded over, if you speak in tongues, you're used by God.
Right. I mean, think about like that conference that I went to where they're like, everyone's going to speak tongues right now. Imagine if no one did.
Yeah.
Or if some people did it just to not feel like embarrassed that they can't.
Yeah. And you know what's nuts? It happens.
I know.
People do that all the time. I mean, Alan Parr in one of his videos said, I can even admit that I spoke in tongues knowingly that it wasn't tongues.
All right. And that's what I said, like when it happened to me, because it was like, is this it? But this was my ignorance of like not really knowing. But it happens a lot because people also don't want to have that thing of like, am I really being used by God? Am I not? Same thing goes with like, again, this isn't every single case, but like when sometimes people lay hands and then like people just start falling. You know, there's some people that have fallen because it's like, I'm just going to do it because everyone else is doing it. And if I don't do it, then like, God didn't really touch me.
Yep.
And, you know, and it's like, we just go about this such a wrong way.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
And it happens. It happens a lot. Because you don't want to look like you're not the spiritual one.
Right. They're
You
like,
don't
oh,
wanna
this
look like
person's
you're
got
not
a
the-
demon really in there que no se quiere salir. Like,
Yeah. You don't want to look like you're the one that's fallen behind.
right.
You know, and so people get pressured into throwing themselves on the floor
But
or
it's sad because
yelling out, you know, hamana because they want to be a part of it.
and you end up leaving home empty. That's the saddest part.
Yeah.
And the worst part about that is that if there's a newcomer that comes into, you know, that, and then there's someone preaching or someone saying like, you know, you need to speak tongues right now, and then the person doesn't, then it's all like, oh, I guess this isn't for me.
Yeah.
You know, or I'm doing something wrong because I'm looking for God wholeheartedly and I can't speak tongues.
Yeah.
You know, and it drives people away. And that's what bad theology, false doctrine will do.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, for those of us that would love to speak in tongues, Paul actually has a message for that specific group.
Right.
I'm even one that, you know, it's like, hey, God, you know, I would love to speak in tongues or experience that one day. But, you know, like you said, once you start reading the Bible, you start realizing certain things.
Right.
You start realizing the importance of other things.
Right.
And so Paul and I'm basically going to just be going through First Corinthians chapter 14,
Right.
because that is a chapter dedicated for this specific topic.
Yeah.
And so Paul in verse 12 and 13, it says, so it is with you, since you are eager for the gifts of the Spirit, try to excel in those that build up the church.
Right. And, you know, going back to, you know, if anyone's questioning themselves, like, why haven't I gotten it? Well, tongues isn't the only gift of the Spirit. You know, there's so many others, you know, and if you start questioning, well, I'm not spiritual enough that I didn't get the, you know, tongues, you know, there's also healing.
Yes.
There's also prophesying. Not everybody gets them.
Yeah.
You know, like God knows what he gives to who he gives and for what reason, you know? So I would definitely say don't feel discouraged if
you don't speak in tongues.
If you don't speak in tongues.
Yeah.
If anything, like the word says, like, pray that you can, you know, God can give you the gift of interpretation.
And I didn't actually get into that verse yet, but yes, in verse 13, for this reason, the one who speaks in tongues should pray that they may interpret what they say as well.
Right.
You know, it's like, and it's crazy because there's this, I mean, I don't think it's out there anymore. And if it is, that's wild. But there used to be classes that you would pay for to speak in tongues.
Right.
And listen, you know, Paul says it very clearly here. Speaking in tongues, that doesn't edify the church if there's no interpretation, okay?
Yeah.
And so if you guys are eager to speak in tongues, don't take classes for it, because one, that's not that's not the way it works.
No.
But another, ask for interpretation. Ask for the ability to interpret what it is that you're saying.
Yeah.
Because if it's not that, then it doesn't edify the church. And honestly, you should probably keep that to yourself, because this is a moment, an intimate moment between you and God, unless he wants it to be vocalized.
Right. And I mean, and there's even a part in 1 Corinthians chapter 14, verse 14. It says, for if I pray in a tongue, my spirit prays, but my mind is unfruitful. Mm-hmm. So you don't understand what you're actually saying. And it's 100% true. Like you feel like, wow, like, God, I am having this moment with you. Yeah. But you actually have no idea. You can only imagine. Yeah. Right. Of like, I'm pure worship right now.
So it's your spirit that's praying that whole time.
Your spirit is being edified.
But yeah, you don't actually know what you're saying. That your mind is unfruitful.
Right. Exactly.
You know?
And it actually continues to say, I feel like this should just be named like 1 Corinthians 14 podcast.
What? Oh.
like this whole episode. So 15 says, so what shall I do? I will pray with my spirit, but I will also pray with my understanding. I will sing with my spirit, but I will also sing again with my understanding. Mm-hmm. All of this is again, like it talks about understanding what it is that you're saying.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I mean, understanding is Paul's main go-to.
Right.
You know, in verse 19, he says, "But in the church, I would rather speak 5 intelligible," I hope I'm saying that right.
Yeah, I think so.
Words to instruct others than 10,000 words in a tongue.
Right.
Why? Because it doesn't do anything for anyone.
Mm-hmm.
It's for your spirit.
Right.
It's between you and God.
Right.
You know, so ideally, speaking in tongues would be rather it's better for you to do it between closed doors,
Right.
not in front of the church.
Right.
You know, I know that there's a lot of pastors and leaders and stuff that practice. Well, we're gonna pray in the spirit and we're gonna pray in tongues and stuff.
Right.
But what are we doing?
Right.
What exactly are we doing?
I think there's an order to everything, you know?
Yeah.
And even when you start continuing, like, reading on, there's, like, the next section says, the next section after, like, 26 and on, it says, good order in worship. Like, God is a God of order.
Yeah.
You know? And it even starts saying, like, 2 or 3 prophets.
Yeah, and I have that one here too.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Where it says 2 or 3 prophets should speak, and the others should weigh carefully what is said. Now, this is going more towards
Oh wait, no.
Wait, that's towards prophecy.
You want to read 27?
Yeah, 27. It says, if anyone speaks in a tongue, 2 or at most 3 should speak, 1 at a time, and someone must interpret.
That's right.
If there is no interpreter, the speaker should keep quiet in the church and speak to himself and to God.
Yep.
You know, because, like, I'll admit, like, there have been times where even I'm in worship, even up front, and, like, yeah, like, I have spoken in tongues, but it's funny because it's like now, well, it's not funny, but if now I try to, like, just kind of turn away and I'm just all like this is my moment with God,
Yeah.
you know, and I'm like, nobody needs to,
that's how it should
you
be.
know, and that's just how I see fit, how it should happen, you know. But there are other people sometimes, again, we don't know everyone's hearts, right? But there have been people, you know, where they'll do it because it's like, oh, I just want to make sure the people know that I am used by God because, look, I can speak in tongues,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, they're puffing up their chest.
And to ones that don't speak in tongues and also don't have the knowledge, it makes it look like, oh, okay, this person must know what they're doing.
Yeah, but, you know, Paul also makes it a point that it's like you have to also think about the newcomers, the people who are new to God or new to your church.
Right.
You know, what are they going to say?
Right.
You know, in verse 23, I know we went to 27, but in verse 23, he says, so if the whole church comes together and everyone speaks in tongues and inquirers or unbelievers come in, will they not say that you are out of your mind? Will they not say that you're crazy?
Yeah. And, you know, growing up, I remember when I would bring, like, friends to church and stuff like that. In my head, like,
go ahead.
When people would speak in tongues, I would look like, oh man, I hope, like, this doesn't look, like, I hope they understand that this is, like, a sacred moment,
right?
Like, that's how I would say it. And
I would
like,
think the same thing.
And I remember I had to explain to one time, I'm like, yeah, so, like, they're speaking in tongues, and that's like a moment that they're having with God and stuff like that. But I didn't know much about it, and that's the best way I can explain it.
So. You did so much better than me. So again, you know, this was going back when I don't think I was with you at the time. But you definitely, you know, if I was, I wasn't nowhere near to understanding what tongues was.
Right.
And, you know, when I brought a friend over, I'm like, hey, you know, like, just letting you know, don't get scared.
Right. Yeah.
You know,
that
like,
was the biggest thing. Don't
get scared. If they start speaking, like, if they start making these sounds and stuff, it's called speaking in tongues, and it's something that they have with God. You know, I don't do that, but don't get scared. It's not going to be throughout the whole church, you know, but they do that.
Growing up Christian.
Yeah. It was just an ignorance, but at the same time, it's like I was kind of embarrassed. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to put a front on it.
Yeah,
I was kind of embarrassed because it's like I myself didn't know, and I didn't know what was going on.
I mean, you're saying you were calling it crazy talk.
I was calling it crazy talk. Like I was just calling it noise and stuff. But this is me as a kid, you know.
Right, of course, yeah.
But it goes back. Paul agrees. He will say that. He will say, you know, if you were to be here in today's church or today's
and that was
what
back
they call hyper charismatic church,
right?
If he were to see what they saw, I mean, what they do today, he would probably be like, guys, what are we doing?
Right.
Anybody that comes in here, they're going to think you guys are crazy.
Right.
They're going to probably run out the door.
Yeah, right.
You know, so we have to be mindful of what we do in our church.
Right.
We have to be mindful of how we act in our church. I'm not putting a limit to anybody's spiritual life. You do what you do, but keep in mind that you're not edifying anybody.
Right.
Okay? If there's no interpreter, it's doing nothing for no one.
Right.
All it's doing is letting people know that you speak in tongues.
Right.
When really this could be something that you could control and have an intimate moment between you and God.
Right. And you know what's funny? I remember growing up again, I remember there was a moment where people were speaking in tongues, and there was this lady that said, like, you know, people really need to learn how to, like, hold it together. And I remember looking at her like, oh, how dare she? Like, they can't do that. Like, it's uncontrollable. Like,
right,
you know?
Right.
And she was all like, no, because, and she was like mad Puerto Rican. I'll translate it in a second. She was like, porque la gente de la calle van a venir aquí, van a decir que es esto y aquí. Like, and she's basically saying, like, people are going to come in, like, what's going on in here and all of this.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, like, no, that's not right. That's not right, her saying that. And now it's, like, funny, like, obviously years ahead, I'm just like, wow, she was right. I mean, she was a lot more blunt about it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
She was a lot more Puerto Rican about it.
Yeah. And people were upset at her. But yeah.
But if you think about it, she does, according to Paul, she has a point.
Yeah, right.
You know,
right.
and it's just, again, you know, we have to be a little bit more aware of what we're doing. I can ask you, you know, you speak in tongues. You've had your moments, right? Do you control it? Can you not do it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like a lot of times, like, it's more like I would love to, like, sometimes just let go, but then there's other moments where I'm like, no, this
it doesn't
isn't,
call for it.
Yeah, right. I'm here, like, I don't need to,
right,
you know,
right.
Like it's not exactly necessary,
right?
But like, it's like I have, like, whispered, like, speaking in tongues.
Interesting.
You know, like in
like
the middle of us, like,
private.
you know, when there's like an intimate moment in worship, like, and let's say I'm not singing up there, right? I'm sitting next to you and we're just raising their hands. There's been moments where I'm speaking in tongues, but I'm to myself. You know,
I can always kind of tell when you are.
Yeah, I know.
You know, like, because I'm next to you and I'm very different. Like, and guys, everybody has their form of worship.
Right.
I'm very different. You know, some people. I remember. God, this is going back into the way I was taught to worship. I remember someone saying, you have to lift up your hands because if you don't, anything you say goes to hell because you're keeping your hands down.
What?
Listen, these are...
Oh, my God.
Yeah, these are things that I was told. So it's like, no, you have to pray with your hands up. You know, that way your words can go to God.
You're like, God, thank you.
Yeah, so...
Like, not even slightly tilted. You're like,
no, your hands have to be all the way up. And yeah, because if not, you know, because your hands by your side means your fingers and hands are pointing down.
Wow.
Yeah. So, you know, man,
I'm sorry.
I lost where I was going.
I find this funny. Like, it's not funny, but it's just like when you've been in church long enough, and especially once you know the truth, it's like, wow, like, that's insane.
Yeah. But, you know, again, like, it's like, I forgot where I was going with this. But for the most part, what I'm trying to say by that is we have to be careful with what we do in our church, with what we teach in our church,
right?
What we're showing in our church,
right.
Because if everyone's speaking in tongues, people are going to feel left out.
Right.
You know, people are going to feel like they're not a part of it.
Yeah.
And someone might actually start speaking in tongues.
Right.
You know?
mean, and it really is different for everyone.
Oh, and for the people that couldn't see me, I did quotations on that. Go ahead.
I don't know how it is for everyone. You know, I have spoken to other people, and I guess I've never really asked this question before, but I would always find it confusing because I'm not one that can speak tongues on command. Mm-hmm. Like, it doesn't work like that for me.
Oh, you mean like when
like,
people
hey,
say,
speak tongues right now.
Yeah,
like
oh, let's whoever knows how to speak in tongues start speaking in tongues.
Yeah,
now.
that doesn't work for me.
No, that actually doesn't. Okay, I can't say that doesn't work that way.
Right.
But what I can say is that's not how it should work.
Right.
That's not how it should be.
It's different for everyone, I guess, but it definitely is not like that for me. And Going back to that portion of like us saying, if you speak tongues, that must mean you're super spiritual. When I first started, actually, when we broke up, there was a time, again, where we broke up, and I was living a moment of like being more secular, if you will. And then I remember thinking like, I don't think I'll ever be able to speak in tongues again because God's just like sad or mad at me.
Right.
And I remember going to a service and I just like broke down, and I'm here like, okay, so this has nothing to do with my like how tight or how like how tight me and God are. No, I'm kidding. No, but like, yeah, these are just like little things you experience, and it's like, I'm trying to figure out my words on like how to say it, but I think there's just a lot of misunderstanding of the part of like, oh, you have to be super spiritual and super on point to be able to have this encounter with God, and that's not how God works.
Meanwhile, if you can prophesy, if you have the gift of knowledge, the gift of discernment, the gift of healing, all these other gifts that can actually edify the church, God would rather you have these things.
Right, but
to grow, give the church strength.
Yeah, definitely. No, but my point to this is more of like, people give this view on people who speak tongues saying like, oh, they must be so spiritual.
No, I'm sorry. That's kind of what I meant, where it's like people put such a high standard to that.
And no, what I'm saying is like, when as a newcomer, like people will look at someone who speaks tongues like, oh my gosh, like they're speaking a language that is only between them and God. That must mean their spiritual life is perfect.
Oh, I see.
And when that
where
happened
you're going.
to me at that point, it just made me realize like, wow, God is here to use the imperfect person.
Oh, I see where you're going.
Like,
I'm sorry.
I didn't have to have this perfect Christian life for me to think.
And you can still be used.
Right.
Yeah. You can still have this connection.
And same goes with just anything in general. Like God can use the craziest moment, a person going through like the worst, to really do his will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's and I think about it today and how I still don't speak tongues, right?
Right.
But
how dare you?
Man, like God, I've always asked God though, like growing up, I've always said, hey, you just use me how you want to use me.
Right.
Unfortunately, it wasn't until now, because although I'm in my teenage years saying this, I was too much of a coward to actually do anything.
Right.
I was too scared to actually stand up in front and speak to anybody.
Right.
Or to do this or to speak God's word to you guys,
Yeah.
So it's like, at the end of the day, you gotta kind of be prepared on your own. You gotta know, you gotta have that want to do it,
right?
That desire to actually put yourself out there. But God was developing me throughout that whole time, and it still is, and He still is. And although I don't speak in tongues, I do ask instead, help me interpret tongues, so that way I can edify the church.
Yeah, I mean we all
that way I'm used to edify the church.
Yeah, we all have different spiritual gifts. We're all one body of Christ. That is like, we're all working together towards the same goal, right?
Yeah.
And we're all like, our gifts are meant, to edify the church.
Yeah.
And in this case, it's like, let's really, I don't know how we can find an interpreter, but like, man, if there's one in your church, like that is like such an amazing gift, I would say.
For sure. And also, just to kind of like recap, because I know that we're talking about whether or not we should do it in our church. In my opinion, I don't think God's going to be upset that someone's doing it.
Right. I don't think it's like, how dare you? You just spoke in tongues.
Yeah. And, and for those that are asking, oh, well, how do I know whether or not that person's actually speaking in tongues or not? Well, I'll tell you this. From the way I'm going to go about it is, if someone starts praying for me in tongues, it's going to be like, hey, what are we doing here?
Right.
Because you're not actually telling me anything that I understand.
Right.
But if someone is on their own speaking in tongues, it's not up to me to know whether that person is truly connected or whether that person is actually speaking by faith or is in that spiritual angelical language, right?
Right.
That's not my business. That is not up to me.
Well, I think that's almost like equivalent to knowing how close someone is with God.
Right.
Like
It's none of my business. Where my business is my salvation. It's how my relationship with God is. It's whether or not I'm being used by God or whether or not I'm allowing God to use me.
Right.
That's what you should be worrying about, not about someone else, not about your neighbor.
Right. I think when it comes to like, at least in the congregational sense, it's like everyone comes with their own baggage. That's like saying like, oh, is this person really singing to God, or are they only singing because you know they like singing?
Yeah.
It's really not up to us. Now, I would say when it comes to the leadership sense, that's something that, you know, I think as like pastors and leaders of the church, like that's where, you know, we really do need to use that discernment, you know, to have the right people up there and to have good theological right knowledge of like what is going on.
Yeah. You know, a lot of people that dive into this theological sense of things, they kind of close themselves out to the emotional sense of things.
Right.
You know, we can't shame anyone for speaking in tongues. It's fine if they do in church or not.
Right.
Paul is okay with it as well. He would rather you not. He would rather you say these things, you know, with an interpreter. You know, this is him saying it because why? Because it needs to build the church. But if you do, just be intentional. I mean, just
be mindful.
Just be mindful. Mindful is the word. Be mindful of what you're doing, because what you're doing, especially if let's say you're a pastor speaking and then out of nowhere you start speaking in tongues, be mindful of that because you're not doing it for the church.
Right.
At that point, you are, if you're really speaking in tongues, it's something between you and God, but no one's going to understand you. So are you really edifying the church?
It's almost like,
so?
Oh, what's the point almost?
Right. And if you can control that, because this is, you know,
right.
It can be, right? If you can control that, then why are you using it? Why are you speaking in tongues if it's not doing anything for the church?
Like I was saying,
especially doing a preaching.
Right. Like I was saying, like there's been times where I've been like in worship and then, you know, I've had like that moment of like wanting to speak in tongues. And a veces like como que se te quiere salir, like it just wants to come out. But, you know, there is restraint that you can't hold, you know? And I think especially now that I have more and more knowledge on this topic of like tongues, it's like even more so where I'm like, be extra aware, you know, because what is it going to do? Yeah. And the beautiful thing is that like, I mean, it even says it like the very, very last verse of 1 Corinthians chapter 14, verse 39. It even says, therefore, my brothers and sisters, be eager to prophesy and do not forbid speaking in tongues, but everything should be done in a fitting and orderly way.
Yeah.
You know, God is a God of order, and there is a certain way, you know, that we should be doing things. Yeah. You know, like, I mean, you could do it in your own way, but there is a perfect way that God is expecting it from us, and a way that that the church can truly be edified. Yep. You know, let's use our gifts to edify the church, not just for yourself.
Yep. 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm so happy that we covered this.
Yeah.
Because, you know,
I think it's been needed.
To some extent, I needed the affirmation is the word that I need. No, the confirmation.
Right.
To reaffirm myself.
Okay.
You know, to know that what I'm saying is true, what I'm thinking is true.
Right.
You know, so it's good to dive into the word. And even if you think you know these things, it's important to refresh yourself because
go revisit.
You know, you should. And again, you know, we always encourage you guys when you hear us speak or when we're going through verses, read it yourself. Right. Although I am going to put it on the caption, go into your Bible and take notes and dive into it yourself. Do your own research.
For me, it gets exciting. Like because I remember getting into this topic and I'm like, no way, like people aren't supposed to, and I'm like, wait a second, and then I started reading more and more, and I'm just like, wow, it's beautiful. It truly is. But you know,
when I first started reading the counterpoint of it, where it's like, no, you shouldn't speak in tongues, I'm like, wait a minute, you shouldn't? Oh wait, you shouldn't. But then I started reading into it, I'm like, wait, no, you can, but it's just it needs to be done this way,
right?
You know, and that's why it's important to look into things on your own.
I just see it,
and ask your leaders.
Right.
You know, if you can't ask your leaders, then look around but it's about because obviously, you know, if you look around, you might be misled. Honestly,
No, I would say usually like your leader should have
you should have a leader that
answers.
you can have that can have the answers for you.
Right. And if
Yeah.
not one of the leaders, then go to a pastor.
Yeah.
The pastor will tell you.
Yeah.
You know, like they're appointed there for your at your church for a reason. So
Yeah. Yeah, but you know, guys, if you stuck around to this point, I'm so grateful for you guys to have been watching.
yes.
You know, again, you know, this is the end. So if you guys like this video, hit that like button because it helps us out with that algorithm.
Yes, and
Yeah.
also just stay tuned because we got something really
Oh,
fun,
we got something cooking.
good.
Yeah.
It's coming in February.
Yep, and it's a collaboration between, you know, us 716 and our editor Misa Rome.
Yeah.
That's coming in for the 1st of February.
Actually, it's a collaboration between a lot of people, but I would say obviously you guys are the one that have orchestrated.
We orchestrated the whole thing.
But
Yeah.
there's just been so many people involved in this.
Yes.
And it's so exciting.
I can't wait to put. I mean, when I said that we were gonna have new things for this new year,
Yeah,
I
like
meant it.
we weren't joking.
Yeah, we weren't
like,
joking.
We really do. And it's coming.
Yeah, yeah. But anyway, you know, you guys have to subscribe because at that
Yes,
point,
make
right?
sure you're subscribed because you don't want to miss it.
Yes.
And also if for some reason, you know, YouTube isn't good, make sure to check us out on Spotify or Audible or vice versa. If you want to actually see like the video recording of this, head on over to YouTube. We are 716. Is it podcast?
716 podcast is our handle name.
Is our handle on Instagram.
Yes, but
yeah,
we are
we just changed
716.
it. So I'm like, wait a second, hold on.
Yeah, but also we are doing highlights now. We are doing podcast
Oh,
highlights.
yes.
And that will be up on Tuesday, tomorrow actually, and Thursdays. I'm going to try to upload them twice a week, plus the new episodes every Monday. And basically it's just to highlight 10 minutes or less of each episode.
Right.
Just
Because
to-
we totally understand that like our
Not
episodes
everybody
are
gets
long.
Yeah,
Our
not everybody gets
episodes
to
are
watch
really
the
long.
whole thing.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're trying to minimize it and bring a little extra because Xavier talks a lot. Like I'm kidding.
Yo. But all right, guys.
All right,
That's
guys,
basically it.
We will see you on the next
Yep.
one.
All right. Bye.
I know I talk a lot. My bad.
Yes, you can. Do we have any more fries left?
Yeah, I think so.